really informative opening session at the San Joaquin Valley Housing Collaborative 10th Annual Summit, and welcome to those of you if this is your first session. My name is Bob Zdenek, and I'm the interim executive director of the San Joaquin Valley Affordable Housing Summit. And our conference this year is titled Rethinking Resiliency in the Valley, which I think is really important given all of the magnitude of what's happened over the past couple years. So what we're doing now is moving into the more in-depth panel sessions. And I was sort of struck with looking at some of the attendees in the various sessions. We have a really good cross-section of advocates, housing developers, researchers, funders, bankers, a whole range. And that's really what this is about, is bringing everyone together to create more affordable housing for low-income families and community revitalization in the San Joaquin Valley. And so I'm going to turn it over to our panel. I'm going to introduce our moderator for the next session, Dr. Tanya Pacheco-Werner, who's co-director of the Central Valley Health Policy Institute, who's going to be your moderator. I'm really glad to see this intersectionality of health and housing. It's so fundamental. Without safe housing or effective housing, health conditions worsen. So Tanya, you can introduce your colleagues, and we'll look forward to learning from this session on research and action and exciting new collaborative partnerships between researchers and community organizations. So take it away.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us today. We hope that this will be an opportunity for us not only to tell you a little bit about the repository, but in the collaborative fashion that we operate in at the Central Valley Health Policy Institute, hope to engage you and what possibilities you see in such a tool. And so I have with me today my panelists who are Patience Milrod. Patience, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Good morning. I'm the Executive Director of Central California Legal Services. I'll tell you a little bit more about who we are and what we do later. Basically, we're legal aid for the Central Valley for 6 counties in the Central Valley, about 500,000 people. So
thank you,
everybody.
Thank you. And then we have Dr. Janine Nkosi.
Good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be here. Janine Nkosi. I teach in the sociology department at Fresno State, and I am the regional advisor for Faith in the Valley.
Thank you. And Dr. Amber Crowell.
Good morning, Amber Crowell. I'm an associate professor of sociology at Fresno State. I also serve as the regional housing coordinator for Faith in the Valley. And I am involved with the Central Valley Housing Data Repository team as well.
Thank you so much. And then someone else from our housing repository team that's here, I'll just introduce quickly, is Denise Rogers-Height as well. So thank you. Thank you, Denise, for joining us. And yeah, we'll go ahead and get started. Really want to have an opportunity to show you a little bit about who we are and what we do, and really the idea kind of stemming from those of you that joined the last session. It is about how do we take the data that's available out there already and really turn it into a usable tool for community members in the broadest sense of the word to use. And before we begin with our panelists, I wanted to just tell you a little bit about the Housing Data Repository and its history, and really why we need it today. So we have a this idea of a housing data repository began in December 2017 when at Central Valley Health Policy Institute we hosted a housing conference, and said, to advance the work of fair housing, what is the number one need that people have? And it really was what emerged resoundingly was a place where we have local housing data available to us, but also a way for us to understand it as well. Because as we know, you can post something on the internet, but it doesn't mean that people will know how to use it or know how to transfer what's in there to action. And so it really was that need of having an interactive data repository. And I don't really need to go, you know why we need one now, in terms of all of the issues that you face on a daily basis in your work. But we really feel like if anything has shown us over the next a year and a half is really the need to understand how we work together for our most vulnerable families that are really facing anything from not being able to purchase their first home, which we know is a great indicator of many things in terms of wealth and ability for their children to advance in life, but all the way from the very serious issue that we face in California, which is homelessness, right? And so really many reasons why right now is really the time that we need to understand what are the things that are happening on the ground, and how can we all come together to solve these issues, as this conference is, and the Housing Collaborative is one of the great ways in which we do come together to do that. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the housing repository through a video that we have. And let me just make sure that
Ms. Rogers. Hi, and
can you all see my
I'm a research assistant with the Central Valley House Policy Institute. Welcome to the Central Valley Housing Data Repository website tutorial. The repository is a public hub for housing, land, and neighborhood data for the Central Valley and for university community collaborations on housing and land issues. Our repository relies on user data set submissions. We are collaborating as a community, and our collection of research is constantly growing. So let's talk about the scope of the Digital Housing Data Repository. The goal of the repository is to build a centralized digital housing data repository that engages the community and helps facilitate research and learning. We do this by partnering with community organizations who are engaged in fair housing action, providing active learning experiences for students through partnerships with those community organizations, and drawing on the repository for high-impact teaching practices. Here are some examples of what those high-impact teaching strategies look like. There's collaborative learning, explicit instruction, feedback, worked examples, things like e-portfolios, community-based learning, internship opportunities, writing-intensive courses, and more. So you might be asking why we should develop a housing repository to begin with. Housing is actually an intersectional issue that's related to many other social inequities that face our region. In 2017, Fresno State hosted a conference where community members working on housing prioritized the need for a place to find local data and a way to assist in interpreting it so that they may successfully tell their stories and make change. Now let's take a look at the repository's website. If you go to Valley Housing Repository, to the home page. And once you arrive to the home page, you'll see a large search bar where you can look for any data sets that you may be curious about, or any information that you may be curious about. If you look below the search bar, you can see how many organizations are currently sharing data with the repository. And if you continue scrolling down, you'll be able to change the language for the website to whatever you prefer. At the top of the page, you'll find 6 links that'll guide you to more information about the repository. If you click on datasets in the upper left corner, you'll be directed to the list of currently available datasets and information that we've received from collaborating organizations or faculty members. If you click on organizations, you'll be directed to a page that shows you a list of participating organizations who are currently contributing data to the repository. If you click on the directory page, you'll be taken to a page that shows you which organizations and researchers are currently collaborating on research projects related to housing. And you will also find our community-based participatory action research toolbox for any other resources. If you click on the About page, you'll be directed to more repository-specific information. And if you click on the login page, you will be able to enter your username and password to continue. You can also create an account here. You'll need to create a username, your name, email. All of this information will be required when you're creating your account. If we go back to the home page, you can use the search bar to look for any data sets that you might be curious about. Once you've searched for the dataset that you might be curious or interested in, you can click on that dataset. You'll be directed to the datasets information page. On this page, you'll find the metadata, the groups associated with the dataset, and you'll find an activity stream which shows you when the dataset was last updated and what exactly was updated. If you go to Explore, you'll have access to downloading any PDFs or any sort of documents that may be attached to this dataset and necessary or significant to the dataset. When you click on the PDF below the description, you'll be directed to the link to download the PDF as well. This page also tells you how many users are currently following the dataset and which organizations are currently working on the data set. If you want to know even more about this organization, you can click on their logo and you'll be directed to their profile page, which lists the data sets that they're currently contributing to or any groups that they would be involved with. When you reach the home page of the repository and scroll down, you'll see very colorful boxes, and those boxes will essentially lead you to some of the same pages as these links at the top left-hand corner. There are some extra features in these colored boxes, like the eviction research that was published by Faith in the Valley. So if you're looking for extra engagement, go ahead and scroll down to these boxes and check those out as well. And finally, if you're interested in contributing data to our repository or in submitting additional housing justice related resources to our community-based participatory action research toolbox, please fill out the form attached at our Contact Us link. If you're interested in joining our community listening sessions, please contact Dr. Tanya Pacheco at tpacheco@csufresno.edu. Or you can subscribe to our mailing list at the bottom of the homepage to stay updated. We look forward to collaborating with you. Thank you so much for your interest in staying engaged with us.
So as you can see, this this repository is meant to be interactive. It's meant to be a centralized hub, and really the idea is that anyone can use it, you know, and since as you may have noticed, right, it is currently in our in the stage that we're forming it, because it really takes the community to actually, you know, contribute data. And so we our team, our panelists will tell you a little bit more about how they're doing some of that outreach and work as well. We hope that you can see yourself as part of the housing data repository ecosystem, as a stakeholder in this work as well. And as mentioned in the video, right, we want you want this to be a place where you can also post any relevant research or reports or publications that that you've recently published on your website, that we can link to from here, to really have a place to have a more deeper targeted audience around housing work. And I just wanted to mention that, you know, while we're while it's Dr. Crowell and Dr. Kosi and myself presenting today, that we have a team here at Fresno State, and additionally, this is a collaboration between many entities at Fresno State, including the Henry Madden Library, which you can also go to link to find the repository webpage as well. So now what I'm going to do is I'd like for us to turn it over to Patience so that she could tell us a little bit more about what we think about and really, you know, how her organization is using data to inform their work as a way to sort of see the potential of this type of repository. So Patience, take it away, and you can just tell me when you'd like me to turn to the next slide.
Thank you, Tanya. If you could move to the next slide, that would be great. Okay, so I apologize. This is the world's most crowded, worst slide in the world, but it's on here for two reasons. One is under estimate of eligible population, you see that there's about 500,000 people that Central California Legal Services is responsible for. We are, it's our job to meet their legal needs. Their definition of eligible is 125% of the federal poverty level or below. So that by no means is an accurate measure of actual economic distress, as we all know. Multiples of the federal poverty level, people are still struggling to feed their families and pay the rent. So this understates significantly the people in our region who are experiencing poverty, but that this is our funders have, this is where our funders have set the eligibility level. Toward the bottom right-hand side, there are specific kinds of cases. So this is a small sliver of the cases that we do, but traditionally we have done a case involving a senior. We have done a case involving a veteran. We have done a case involving a domestic violence victim, at one at a time. Same with unlawful detainers, which are eviction court eviction processes. So traditionally we do one UD at a time for one family at a time. So given how many people we have to serve, that's a pretty unreachable goal. And so as a law firm, as the law firm that's responsible for legal aid in our Central Valley, it's our job to think about ways that we can serve more people by doing a single case. And data is our friend in this respect. So one of the things that we turned our attention to is obviously one of the drivers of rent burden and actually homelessness also is the lack of adequate units that are affordable to our client population. So part of our job then is like, what do we need to do to increase the availability of housing? And so we look around and we look at municipalities that are required to zone and plan to accommodate affordable housing. And so we looked at Clovis, which is traditionally, it certainly has a reputation for being exclusionary. And so, and we looked at their failure to comply with those laws that say you've got to zone and plan for low-income housing. Like, let us take a closer look. So next slide. So, it's cut off a little bit, but on the left-hand side, it's the title is relative percent white. On the right-hand side, relative percent in poverty. And this is the Fresno Clovis metropolitan area. You can see up in sort of on each map, sort of in the middle toward the right is a black outline. That is the city of Clovis. And you can see on with respect to both categories, and this is drawn from the American Community Survey, I think 2018. In both categories, Clovis is whiter and wealthier than its immediate neighbor, city of Fresno, and actually then Fresno County, then the whole region. So this kind of confirms what we had been led to believe. I certainly have, probably anybody who lives in the Fresno Clovis area is aware that people of color don't feel welcome there often. The police department has got a reputation. I mean, there's lots and lots and lots of anecdotal evidence that indicates racial hostility. And then we look and we see, my goodness, there's not very many people of color there compared to the rest of the region. So could we go to the next slide? So we asked a scholar from UC Merced, Jessica Traunstein, to take a look at this for us. Like, is this actionable? And this is her slide. Again, I'm pretty sure based on ACS data. And it compares 1970 on the left and 2018 on the right. And it compares the city of demographics in the city of Fresno and the city of Clovis over that approximately 40-year period. And what we see on the left-hand side in 1970 is that Clovis and Fresno, Clovis is the empty box and Fresno is the one with the horizontal lines in it. So we see that actually percentage white, they're pretty close. Percentage homeowners, they're pretty close. Fresno's actually got more in 1970, had more high income residents than Clovis did, while it also had a few more folks in poverty than Clovis did. So for all intents and purposes, demographically, Fresno and Clovis were pretty much indistinguishable in 1970. So fast forward to 2018, it is a really, really different picture. Twice as many white people as Fresno, significantly more homeowners, significantly, it looks like at least twice as many high income residents, and about half as many people in poverty. So how did that happen? And Dr. Traunstein concluded that this wasn't an accident. This didn't happen by chance. This couldn't happen by chance. And that it was a direct result of the exclusionary zoning and planning policies of the city of Clovis. So ding, we have a case, which we filed and we took to Superior Court, and the Superior Court judge agreed with us that Clovis's planning and zoning policies violated the law over that 50-year period, and that is the cause of these disparities. And that Clovis's refusal to plan and zone for affordable housing is one of the endemic problems of our region, and that more affordable housing, especially in neighborhoods of opportunity, which Clovis certainly defines itself that way, is essential in order to provide housing equity. So I guess this is a use case, probably not how most of you will be using data, but I'm excited about the housing data repository for our Central Valley because it opens up opportunities like this where, as a lawyer, I'm always looking for where can I put my lever to make a bigger difference for more people. And when we can get the bigger picture from the data, it gives us leverage that otherwise we don't have. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Patience. Yeah,
I just need to say, I'm sorry, one thing, I have got to staff a board meeting at noon, so I'm going to be stepping away in a little bit. So I apologize in advance.
No, thank you so much, Patience. Totally understand. And I think that when you see, data that is so undeniable from one, year to the other, it really is sort of hard to argue with in terms of where we go to next, in terms of once you see certain data in front of you, it's hard to ignore it, right? And I think that that's part of what you found. And I did want to make sure that you all have a chance to check the Whova chat as well, where we'll be posting links and interaction, because I know that the chat is disabled on Zoom. So I do want to make sure that you know that we're monitoring that as well. Great. So I want to now turn to, now that we know a little bit about really what is the potential of data in terms of how to move forward in advancing the issues that we're all most concerned about, which is housing affordability among them and the availability of housing stock. I do want to turn to another example from my colleagues, Dr. Nkosi and Dr. Crowell, who will be talking to us about some of the eviction research that they worked on. So let's go ahead and take it away here.
All right, thanks, Tanya. I'll start us off. Janine and I are going to bounce back and forth through this part of our presentation. So thank you all for being with us today, and following behind patients is actually really perfect because first of all, we've worked with patients through it in CCLS with this work. They've really been very informative in supporting the work that we do through Faith in the Valley in Fresno State. So what we're going to talk about in our portion of the presentation is taking that work that you can do with housing data to the next level of being collaborative and actionable, and supporting local organizing efforts as well. And so Janine and I are both faculty researchers at Fresno State, but we also work with Faith in the Valley. And so our goal is to really make these two worlds one. In the work we do with our students and the work we do with community organizers and resident leaders. And so that's what we're going to try to hold here today and demonstrate with the work that we've been doing. A lot of it's been happening in Fresno, but it's also regional work. And so there's been some work outside of Fresno as well that we're going to highlight. So, oh, I just realized I don't have slide control. I was trying to change it. Thanks, Tanya. So some of y'all may be familiar with the reports that we've been producing since 2019, starting with our Evicted in Fresno report in 2019. So in 2019 and on through the pandemic, we used eviction court records, and we were also in eviction court at the Fresno Superior Courthouse, the BFSIS courthouse, doing eviction court observations. And our goal was to tell a story about the eviction process, one that describes the magnitude of the problem, because we knew that folks were getting evicted and displaced. We knew that rent is unaffordable in Fresno and across the Central Valley, more so than it is in other parts of the state, because while rents are higher in the Bay Area and Southern California, folks are less able to afford the rent here. And so it's all relative. So what we were focusing on was a very acute aspect of the housing crisis, one that was an immediate crisis for folks on the ground. And we wanted to not just talk about the magnitude of the problem, but highlight the injustices of the system. Because when we talk about eviction, this isn't just a standard process where if folks get evicted, it's because they didn't meet the terms of their lease, and that's the end of the story. We knew that there was something more to that. We knew that a society where folks can't keep their homes and they don't even get a chance to tell their side of the story is not the way things should be. And so that's really where we started with this part of the housing work. Of course, Faith in the Valley has a deep history of housing work, so this is just one part of that larger story. So starting in 2019, we were anticipating the arrival of Professor Matthew Desmond, who is probably the most well-known academic researcher when it comes to evictions. He wrote the Pulitzer Prize-winning book, Evicted. He was preparing to visit in November 2019 Fresno to launch the exhibit at the Fresno County Library on his eviction work. And we saw this as an opportunity to really take control of the local narrative. We had this very well-renowned national expert on eviction coming to Fresno to tell us about evictions. And while his knowledge and work was really important, we wanted to make sure that folks here in Fresno got to share what they already know and experience. And so that's what precipitated this work. We produced the Evicted in Fresno report in November 2019. We took eviction court records and alongside students and community partners, analyzed them and pulled out from that data a very complicated story of what was happening, why people were getting evicted, why the eviction rates are so high and why they happen so fast. Because what we found, one of the things we found is that an eviction process typically takes about 30 days. And we saw some that took as little as 6 days from the time that people got a notice to the time that they were told to leave the unit. So that work created this foundation so that when COVID hit, it took on a whole new level of importance and we felt well equipped to start taking action. So we it took the work that we were doing in Fresno and produced a report for Kern as well in August 2020. And we also produced a report for San Joaquin County in August 2020 as well. We knew from our data that we had analyzed in 2019 that thousands of people were being evicted in pre-pandemic times, which is incredibly alarming. It was an eviction rate that was higher than in the Bay Area or in Southern California. And that was a peak recovery from the recession, right? We're talking about 2019 when things were finally starting to look like maybe we had recovered as best we could from the 2007, 2008 crash. So what could that mean now as we entered the pandemic? It meant we were facing a disaster. And so we took these reports and moved into the next phase of our work, which we'll get into a little bit later. But I'm going to pass it to Janine now to talk more about the work we did here with these reports.
Thank you, Amber. So I just wanted to start out by saying that, so when we began this as a piece of the ongoing work that Amber was speaking to, and this emerged out of our grassroots organizing efforts, we started to uplift solutions that people who are directly impacted by the evictions crisis wanted to bring and wanted to see in Fresno and Fresno County and in the Central Valley. And we were met with questions about the scope of the problem. There were some folks that thought maybe this is an isolated incident, and we don't at that time didn't have quantifiable, data, statistics and data that we could bring to decision makers and say, this is the evidence to support these policies and these solutions that we want to advance. And so to try to wrap your mind around the scope of the problem, it's a pretty significant undertaking. This work has been a labor of love, a labor to advance justice, bringing together so many amazing, passionate, dedicated partners around a shared vision. And our shared vision was to do what we can to help stabilize housing for Central Valley residents. Each one of the different stakeholders, you see some of the organizations on the right-hand side, each of the stakeholders, whether it be residents who are directly impacted by the housing crisis and are leading the efforts to advance housing justice campaigns, whether it be college students who are also very much impacted by the housing crisis, whether it be community benefit organizations that are doing work day in and day out. Each stakeholder played one or more key roles. So for an example, the sociology department, we led in some of the efforts to do the data collection and data analysis, but very much alongside community partners and alongside residents. CCLS engaged as an information partner to educate us around the eviction process, to educate us around legal terminology, to help us make sense of the court records. You had organizations like Faith in the Valley and Leadership Council who were co-collaborating in both areas, many overlapping areas, to do important work to lead in the development of bottom-up solutions, to do organizing and kind of hold the work on the lobbying front, because each of our organizations has expertise and we've got, limitations that will allow us to engage in this work in different ways. And that's what's beautiful about bringing so many people together, is that each one of us can play a really key and critical role. And so what did we do? We literally had to create our own data set. We did this by first going to the courthouses, and literally, like, they were wheeling up paper court records, and in that journey then we learned about different online data portals that were available, and we put together like really incredible teams to literally extract and scrape thousands of court records to build a very robust data set. Then we've got folks with expertise that were able to take that data set that we created ourselves and then bring in pieces from, say, like the eviction lab, bring in pieces from the US Census, so that we could create an even more robust picture of the eviction crisis. We engaged in many conversations with different organizations who have a history of advancing housing justice campaigns, hosted listening sessions. Folks in this space might be more familiar with the word focus groups, with many community partners. Pre-pandemic, some of these were face-to-face and at elementary schools in areas that have been hit hardest or are disproportionately impacted by rent burden and evictions and poverty and other issues, right? And so then post-pandemic, we have been holding these virtually, but it's been a very collaborative process that we've all undertaken. And then we, in our findings, which we already knew, but we had now the data to support that there pre-pandemic were tens of thousands of evictions that were happening in Fresno County. It's somewhere between 2,500 to 3,000 formal evictions that were being filed with the courts every year. And then research by the eviction lab and Desmond and his team out of the Milwaukee area and other areas since then show that there are likely twice as many evictions that happen outside of the courts. And now then with the pandemic, this has only been exacerbated, and we've been able to do additional research showing the projected number of households that will be impacted and could have been impacted had we not put the research into action, which is where we're going to go next, showing how we were able to pass important policies and practices in order to help stabilize housing. And so I'm going to turn it back over to Amber to get us started with that piece.
So this is what we did with that work. After we produced the reports, immediately after the Evicted in Fresno report, we went all out alongside our community partners, alongside resident leaders, to get the story out there, to really take control of the narrative about what was happening with evictions in Fresno. Because up to this point, outside of advocates saying this isn't right, most people, I think, looked at eviction as something that was kind of the sad thing happening in our community, but didn't really think about it beyond just it's an individual person's problem. And so what we did was we took that data and showed, look, this is a societal issue. There's a lot of injustice in the process. This does not have to be the way that it is. And so we got the report out there first, and I dropped the link in the chat. If you're in Hoover, you can go to that page that's screenshotted there on the left and see the report for yourself. And then we took all of those findings, all that data, the fact that most tenants go to court without an attorney, even though most landlords do have an attorney because they can afford one. The fact that a lot of the folks who are getting evicted have very little time to get everything in order to head to court and defend their case. And that just the sheer fact that thousands of families every year, hundreds of families a month, almost 300 families a month, were getting evicted in Fresno every month. It didn't matter if it was in the middle of a school year. We looked at the patterns. For month to month, it stayed the same. It's not like kids are in the middle of their school year that evictions take a pause. We took all of that and we got the report out there, and then we alongside our students who were deeply involved in the work, we wrote an op-ed that we sent to the Fresno Bee, and we got the entire Sunday paper to do it. So really shout out to Fresno V for supporting this work too. They've actually been supporting this work the whole time. So I really want to give credit to our local media as well and the collaborations that we've had with them. And what we did with that op-ed was we really took that story of eviction and said, look, this system is not really about just getting people what they're due. It's a system of profit. It's a system of injustice. And we, from there, started just really pushing for policies that could change what we were seeing. And this was all done not from an academic perspective, but from a starting with the community and what the community was experiencing and working alongside of them so that their voices were part of the story too, saying, this is what's really happening and this is what needs to happen moving forward. And from that, these policy pieces started to emerge that we've been working on ever since. And COVID just, if anything, COVID just accelerated the work because it just became that much more urgent. And Janine, I'll bounce it back to you.
Tanya, you can go to the next slide. So some of the other ways that we engaged in education and awareness. And I think this is really important, especially as some of us in this space may be doing work within institutions. I know some of my own personal experience has been that when we do research or we maybe develop policies or solutions, oftentimes our starting point is not to take it to the community, not to engage in public awareness and community education. And that is something that's really beautiful about being working alongside community benefit organizations and residents who are directly impacted and are leading in the work, is that we were able to engage in this really incredible education and awareness campaign or efforts. And we used things like, on the left-hand side, this is one of the Fresno State students. Students created TikToks. And, we're able to reach, not just young people, but meeting young folks on social media where they're at to raise awareness and invite folks into the ongoing efforts to stabilize housing. We did interviews and community education with Valley Public Radio, Leadership Council, Faith in the Valley, Fresno State students from the sociology department. We were a part of a shared learning space to do really deep research on the different solutions that we could bring to help stabilize housing and combat the evictions crisis. And so one of the images here is a blog post that Leadership Council posted, educating folks about one of the campaigns that we have been trying to advance, which is a right to counsel. Basically, it means that if anyone finds themselves in housing courts and they can't afford an attorney, that they would have a right to an attorney. And so anyway, there's information there. We worked with Ethnic Media Services, and they put together a really beautiful space, bringing together different media outlets, print, television, radio into a shared space. So that we could share our research that we had done across the Central Valley. The picture on the top is us showing up to city council hearings, showing up into spaces, and Amber's going to say a little bit more there about the civic engagement work that we have been able to do.
Okay, can we get the next slide? So yes, it wasn't just education and outreach. It was also action. It was about pressuring our elected leaders to take this data seriously, because of course they want to see the data. So we said, okay, we've got it. So here it is. And this is now what we want you to do. And you can't deny that it's needed. And so there have been there's so many examples. We could probably fill up an entire PowerPoint slide presentation of instances and meetings and press conferences that we have had where we have demanded that our elected leaders listen to us. And by us, I mean not just the people who worked with the data, but the folks who that data represents. They were in those spaces too. So the resident leaders, the mothers who'd been evicted with their children, they were right there side by side with us, saying, here's the data, because that's what you want, but here's me too and my story. And so we've had meetings with city council members. We've flooded public comment sessions, saying when there's something on the agenda, like right to council, making sure that, they know a lot of people are behind this. And we threw the data factoids at them every chance we got. So we've been in Fresno City Council meetings. We've stood outside City Hall. The screenshot over there on the left is of our housing organizer, Alex Alvarado, also a former Fresno State student, standing outside of City Hall after a press conference we held to push for a right to counsel program in Fresno, which did eventually, some version of it did eventually emerge in the city in response to that. At the top, you see a screenshot of TJ Cox, Congressman TJ Cox, tweeting about his research meeting that he had with Faith in the Valley and Fresno State students, where we showed him in the middle of the pandemic. This was August 2020, so right heading into that really bad surge, saying this is how many people could potentially face eviction. And a lot of people didn't believe these numbers, but it was pretty dead on. Based on everything that we had researched, based on what we knew from national experts. And so it really got their attention that we need not just local protections, but we need national protections too. And so at every level of government, we were showing folks this data that started with just analyzing local court records and getting residents to tell their stories, and pushing at every level that we needed action and immediate action. You also see in the far right research meeting with Tyler Maxwell, where we were pushing for a right to counsel. And just it goes on and on. At the bottom there, you see a city council meeting where a bunch of students and resident leaders and organizers showed up to give public comment as well. And so there's so many examples of us doing this work and continuing to do this work. And so it wasn't just taking the data and saying, here's the report, take a look at it, please. We have been using it as a tool, one of many tools to make things change. The immediate response, because COVID really forced us to think about the immediate response, but also bigger systems change as well. And I will bounce it back to Janine.
The last piece, and I just want to reiterate what Amber had said earlier, is that there are so many things, so much more than even what we're uplifting in this space right now that we've been able to do together and what's come out of this work. And one other piece that we want to share about is the way that we ourselves as college professors, as educators, are integrating, making life the curriculum. Our students are impacted by the housing crisis. Even for students that are not necessarily impacted by the trauma and the challenge and the struggle of housing, we're all a part of the same system. We're a part of the same land and housing system, and some of us have benefited from that, and some of us have been locked out of opportunity. And so we are integrating this research, critical thinking, writing, civic engagement, all of this into our classroom spaces, and working with other faculty that also want to reimagine their classroom spaces and engage in more transformative work that really builds incredible bridges between our university and the community and what's happening, so we can engage in deep, meaningful work together. This is an image here of the Homes Guarantee campaign that collectively we just launched last semester. And I want to just give a quick shout out to the Homes Guarantee team that's going to be presenting tomorrow at 1 o'clock, I believe, if you want to learn more about the Homes Guarantee, which is a holistic picture of what's possible if we come together and transform our land and housing justice system toward one where everybody can really thrive. We did deep work to learn about our own housing story. We did deep work to learn about the current state of housing, the long, deep history of land and housing policy, laws, and practices that have contributed to the current state of housing right now. And we also do deep work around trying to understand what are the possibility of solutions and social action and organizing. And so this is a virtual press conference that we held And there were over 100 people that showed up, residents, community benefit organization folks, elected representatives, to hear about the homes guarantee. And this is ongoing work. It's going to take, 10 years and longer for us to truly transform the housing system as we know it. But research and data is going to play a really critical role in that work, and also stretching our imagination of how we think about data and what data is credible and all those kinds of things. And I'll stop there and transition it back over to Amber for one final piece.
So yeah, thinking, I really like the stretching our imagination, right? Expanding our imagination to think about what's possible. These are some of the things that are possible in addition to, shifting the power dynamics in terms of whose voices matter and whose knowledge and experiences matter. But here are the real policy changes that have occurred because of data and because of all the incredible organizing work around that data. So during COVID, we immediately, all that research that we had started doing on eviction specifically in 2019, really prepared us to take action when the pandemic began. So in March, and by we, I mean organizers, residents, researchers, students, we were already, like, as soon as the state was shutting down, I think even before the state shut down, we were already pressuring jurisdictions across the San Joaquin Valley to put moratoriums in place, to provide rental assistance, to shut down the courts. Because right up, I think like a week before the state shut down, I was in eviction court and folks were still shoulder to shoulder in eviction court because they processed so many evictions every week, in the middle of what was looking to be a very deadly pandemic. So we were on the ground already pushing and fighting for things to change based on the research and that data that we had started working with prior to the pandemic. So we got housing stabilization measures passed pretty quickly in Stockton, Fresno, and Delano. And big shout out to the leaders in those local jurisdictions who in some cases reached out to us for support. We were out there giving public comment, writing op-eds, really pushing for these things to happen as quickly as possible. At the state level, we had AB 3088, which we organized pretty strongly around. That was the first moratorium through the state legislature in California. When that expired, then we had SB 91, which is similar, but with some added, with some changes, but similar kind of rules about who can be evicted and what circumstances protect them from eviction. We had AB 832, which was rent relief. And we now have passed through the legislature AB 1487, which is that legal assistance that we have been insisting is needed. Because again, most tenants, and by most I mean like 95 to 99% of tenants, go to eviction court without attorneys. And if you can explain housing law, I'm pretty sure you can't. Tenants can't either. And so those attorneys are really needed. Housing law is complicated, and it's completely unfair that they go into housing court without those legal, without that legal expertise. So these are things that we've organized for locally, state level. We also have emergency rent assistance in the 5 counties where we organize. And in Fresno, a big one for us here in Fresno is the Eviction Protection Program, which is a version of the Right to Counsel program that we had proposed from the community. But it does provide some legal assistance to certain folks who meet their criteria. And it's big, considering that there's nothing else like this anywhere in the San Joaquin Valley. It's a big change nonetheless. And so these are things that are real policy changes that are changing the way we think about housing and the right to housing, because they're all based in this understanding that people have a right to housing, not just in a pandemic, but after a pandemic, in times that are not crisis mode, because they're all geared towards tenant protections, towards protecting folks who are in their homes and are at risk of losing their homes. And with that, I think we will pass it on to the next thing.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, I think that this work has been really fantastic and really goes to show how the work can be really long and ongoing, but really with commitment we can really move forward. There was a question early on, particularly when it came to your report on San Joaquin County, if there was a median housing and rent list for San Joaquin County, if there's anything that you know of.
Like the cost of housing, I'm assuming that's what that question is about. I'm not certain for sure.
And honestly,
hi, this is this is James Collins from California Council of the Blind. I wanted to just ask to see what the median cost of living or housing market would look like for anyone in general, and how that compares to say like maybe like a Bay Area market or other parts of the country, or excuse me, the state.
Yeah,
Sorry.
there's a really great tool by the National Low Income Housing Coalition. It's their Out of Reach. They do a big report every year called the Out of Reach report. I'll put the link in the Whova chat, but it basically every year they look at housing costs, and they have some really helpful breakdowns of, how many jobs would you need to work at minimum wage to afford housing in this county. So you can do states and counties, and then there's like, how much does it cost to get a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom? And so it really kind of not just shows you the cost of housing, but puts it in perspective, like how unaffordable housing is. And so you can compare jurisdictions. I'll put the link in the chat.
Okay, I appreciate that. Yeah, again, we're just trying to advocate for our blind and low vision ADA folks. So just to see like what affordable housing looks like throughout the Central Valley. So yeah, that'd be nice.
Thanks, James. And I think highlighting a very important intersection, right, in the work that that often goes unnoticed in terms of our housing affordability and availability, that when it comes to our neighbors with disabilities, how they may be at further disadvantage and already being underemployed or unemployed. So thank you. I do want to move on now to talk a little bit about this idea of faculty collaboration. Really has, it isn't something that is just, naturally, when you go to graduate school and you learn about everything you need for your degree and then apply for your job, doing this type of work that Amber and Janine have undertaken is a lot. And so they've really taken their lessons learned and are applying them to teach others, and incorporating them into this data repository work. So I'll have Amber and Janine again tell us a little bit about that.
Thank you, Tanya. I think Amber and I have been sharing at least some bits throughout the eviction campaign or project that we showcased today about the different ways that we faculty are building bridges and really co-collaborating alongside community benefit organizations. And this is a really exciting piece of the repository that Dr. Crowell and I have been holding together. And so on July 26th, we held our first listening session with grassroots organizations, Faith in the Valley and Leadership Council, and faculty who are interested, they have an interest or a passion, maybe they've already been doing work connecting their classroom teaching or their research with deep, meaningful community work. Or maybe it's something that they are newer to and they have an interest. And so anyway, we created a listening session space to bring together these different groups of people so that we could share lessons and insight with how CBOs have engaged with faculty and academic institutions in the past. And we could co-think on new ways that the university can co-collaborate and engage with their students, with our students, in deep, meaningful community work that's really centered on and led by the voices and experience and long history of what the CBO partners have been doing. And then we followed up with and did one-on-ones with faculty who expressed an interest in coming together in an ongoing space so that we could share insight, share lessons, share resources. And so we've been holding one-on-ones with those faculty who are interested. And then from there, that's the work that we're holding this year. And then from there, Amber's going to talk about some of the kind of where are we going. We're building relationship right now, building relationship around shared values and shared vision and shared interests. And then we've got some ideas for what some spaces and work might look like together.
Yeah, so over the ongoing, oh, can you go back? Thanks. Over this academic year, these are some of the things that we've got going on with faculty that we envision that will really pull them in or pull them out of the comfort zones that they currently live in and out into community spaces where they work alongside community. And so we're really just pushing faculty to reimagine the way that they work, to take all that expertise and all that knowledge and the really valuable experience they have and combine it with all the expertise and knowledge and experience of the community. And so we've got faculty, we're inviting faculty, any faculty to upload the data that they have, the housing data that they have, especially, of course, if it came locally to the repository, so that data can be made public and used by anyone who wants to use it. And so that's really kind of giving that data back to the community. We also are forming a cohort of faculty, so those faculty who we've been doing these one-on-ones with over the past couple of months, who are committed to community-based housing research to reimagine their teaching and research alongside CBO. So really helping them through that process, because it's hard to unlearn the way that we've been taught to do academic research. And so we're really, this cohort is a supportive space to get them through that process. And then we also are doing project development for community-based housing research and teaching. So faculty who have ideas or want support developing ideas, that's where those one-on-ones come in. That's where that space that we were building with the cohort comes in. And then finally, we're doing technical workshops and tutorials for actually accessing and using the site. So this is more for not just the really engaged faculty, but any faculty who want to use the site and contribute their data. And maybe that's as far as they want to go, and that's okay. We're doing those technical workshops and tutorials as well, so that they make the data available to everyone and usable and documented and all those things that are needed.
Excellent. And I think that one of the reminders that we want to, make sure that everybody knows is that, again, we just have such an opportunity right now for faculty and the community at large, which are all of you, to become involved in this type of work. And we did share some articles on UVA about the Newsom and Biden administration's latest actions and recommendations on and plans around this work. And so I do want to make sure that that's on your radar as well. But at this time, I really want to take the opportunity to really hear from you in terms of now seeing a couple of examples of the type of work that has emerged in this type of space that we're creating around shared data, what you see as the possibilities. And so really the two questions are, what type of data would you like to see in this repository? And also, what potential do you see in a community and faculty collaboration in your work? And so for the most broad definition of community, right? We really see every single one of you tuning in as part of the community that can be part of this repository and that we'd like to be part of this repository. And so we're going to break up actually into 3 groups where we'll have an opportunity to hear from you about what, what are the types of data you'd like to see and what potential do you see in this type of collaborative space. So if we can go ahead and get our breakout rooms in just 3, will be great. All right. Thank you so much. So as you come back here, I just wanted to give an opportunity for anyone to reflect. I know that thank you so much. I know that in our breakout room, we had a good conversation about really the local context really resonating and really need for more data around the cost, the ongoing cost for rent, and so a way for people to really capture that and be able to know the latest data on that is important, and also have a way to sort of validate some of the real estate data that may be out there, or having a way to integrate between real estate data and research data as well. And then the idea of really training residents to input the data in technology to really get a more unique way to have information that, from the ground, and for that to be able to be incorporated into research projects, as well as I think that idea of working with faculty, the idea of needing the faculty to really know the type of training that really Janine and Amber are offering, which is how to bring a project from an idea into action. And so that, and I don't know, Janine and Amber, if you want to share any highlights that from your group that were a little bit different than what I mentioned.
Yeah, I really appreciate all of the folks that were in our space and shared out some really great ideas or needs that they have. We had folks share a need to understand what's the landscape, what is the current landscape of affordable housing? So like how many units and what's the status and availability? And what's in the pipeline. So who are the developers? What are the projects that are in the pipeline? And where are they located, or where will they be located? We had folks share a need for data and research on the housing demand, because this then helps to make the case for why we need more affordable housing. Someone asked about the need for information around overcrowding. And how many people there are per house. I know that some of this, there's data that is available for some of these, and it'll be great, right, for us to be able to put this stuff in the repository and make it just more accessible to folks. The location of multifamily housing and its proximity to transportation and services. Data that might look at the intersections of housing and water access. A visual directory for the Central Valley of who's doing what. So like a full landscape of all of the housing stakeholders across the Central Valley. So that way we can, connect with one another, or if we have a need, we've got this directory and we kind of know who are the different folks that we can reach out to and connect with. Those were some of the things that came up.
Thanks, Janine. That's great. Amber?
Yeah, just to add, I also had a really great and engaged group. So thank y'all for bringing so many ideas and needs to the table. I had a couple of folks highlight the real shortcomings of using census data, which folks are often pointed to, which is that census data geography is not really adequate for rural communities. You're talking about census tracts that are really big. In urban areas, it's not a huge deal, but in rural communities, they're really not great for learning about communities within rural areas. So there was a need for parcel data, which we know is much more difficult to compile and to make available. And so that's definitely, I think, a place where the repository can be a resource. And then also data on housing needs for folks with disabilities as well, which we've heard in spaces in the past.
Absolutely, absolutely. Wow, thank you all so much. And I mean, this is helping us not only with our data when it comes to the repository, what we're looking at to put in at CVHPI to put into our repository now, but it's helping us, Amber and Janine in their one-on-ones and the faculty collaboration, just to really fill the need that we're seeing being identified in the community as well, to take that on. So I do just want to let you all know that we do have a way for you to be involved with us and join our community. We have a feedback form that you can fill out, and we will put it in the chat on Whova so you can see. And we do hope that you'll fill that out for us, and you'll and so that we can have a way to be in touch with you about this ongoing work. So thank you so much for your time, and we hope to be further engaged with you all.
I want to thank, on behalf of the collaborative, thank Tanya, Amber, Janine, and the rest of the panel. I learned a lot. I really saw how action research has been put into use in terms of some of the legislation that's passed in the last couple of years, and some of the other really great work that you're doing. And you have a session, some of your colleagues have a session tomorrow at 1 o'clock. So looking forward to that. And again, thank you. And I also, these conferences are not easy to put together. Sometimes it looks, especially virtually, that that's sort of effortless, but it's far from that. And so I really want to thank Andrea Salas, who's been doing the heavy lifting, along with, we have a conference planner who's actually in Sao Paulo, Brazil, as I speak. Her name's Sylvia Marita Patel, but she's the one that brought the HUVA together. And as I said, she taught me how to pronounce it correctly, but it's a really great tool. And so please continue to use it. And we look forward to seeing you at 1 o'clock. So you're gonna have a speed lunch because we have a really good session on low-income housing tax credit, which is the major source of financing for rental housing, low-income rental housing in the United States. So again, thank all of you for joining and for our panel, and look forward to seeing you at 1 p.m. Andrea, anything else?
Nope, we're good. See you all soon. Have a great lunch.